number of skeptics, because I would like to hear that. I would like to hear your arguments and understand those. But first, what are the enabling, are there more enabling things? I see Patos raising hand and Oliver and the lady over there. So ladies first.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question concerning the enabling part of it. From a pure client point of view, if I am, let's say, I'm in a country and my eBay website is DNSSEC enabled. Now I'm in Italy, for instance. I don't have an internet service provider who is until now DNSSEC enabled, but eBay.it is an international registrar and has DNSSEC enabled. Am I sure or I'm still on attack? And today we saw a station where it seems we're not yet there. So should I wait until 2015 to really be an eBay?
Who wants to answer that question? So to paraphrase the question, before we have the infrastructure in place that allows me to validate eBay.it on any places where I go. So if I open my laptop here and I want to do business with eBay.it, can I rely on DNSSEC to trust eBay.it? Will it really take till 2015 before I'm able to trust my website or my transactions using DNSSEC? First, Jim.
So yesterday, we had the question, when do we know that we're done with DNSSEC? And I gave the answer then that we know when we're done when we stop talking about it. And I think that this is a situation where we do have to continue to talk about it a little bit to get to a solution to what you're asking for. When you're done talking about it, that means that DNSSEC is deployed in a very large part of the infrastructure. But what's interesting is you can incrementally use it if one wants to, if you take an active role and an active part in the use of the technology. So if eBay.it signs their zone, then the users of eBay.it can benefit from that if they themselves have a browser which does the validation on their own machine and on their own server, on their own laptop. Okay, so that would be the way in which you could get the benefit. The downside there, again, is the user has to be an active participant in that. You have to choose to do that validation and choose to embrace that technology. Obviously, eBay, as well as any website, could facilitate that. I mean, that would be the benefit that they would want, right? They would want to encourage you to upgrade your browser, to have the right plugins, the right components to make all of that happen. But I think that's the answer for that, and in general, that kind of question about how do I take advantage of the technology now?
Steve? I'm going to give you the mic on the benefits.
So I liked your question a lot. It caused me to think about an interesting idea. One of the challenges that we've had in the DNSSEC whole project is identifying useful and appropriate intermediate points. We know where we started, which was nothing. We know where we want to go, which is everything. And but we also know that everything will take a very, very long time. So it's very helpful to have clear, easy to communicate intermediate points. And so your question, let me try this idea out, that when a transaction involves money, that the expectation should be that the pieces are secured, and DNSSEC is a piece of that equation. So I don't know exactly how to fit all of this together, but I think it's possible that sometime relatively soon we should be able to say to the entire world, to the entire community, that not everything will be secured with DNSSEC, but everything that involves a financial transaction should have DNSSEC as part of it, and if it isn't, then you want to either ignore it or you want to look very funny at it. So to go to CNN or YouTube or Google, that's okay, but if you're going to go to eBay or if you're going to go to Amazon or if you're going to go to some store, a little boutique, it should be DNSSEC secured. And the question in my mind is, how soon can we get to that point? And I would say, well, we have to wait for COM to be signed, and then we have a case that we can make to every enterprise that is below COM, and COM is just the biggest one, but it would also apply to everybody else.
That's interesting, because my approach would be that DNSSEC would be more important for those institutions that do not do certificates already, like news sites. As I gave an example yesterday, and because you mentioned specifically CNN.com as not being important, I believe that securing CNN.com is extremely important, so that fake news articles that sort of can steer financial markets are not possible, because I believe that is one of the things that we haven't seen yet, but is definitely has potential, market potential for criminals.
Interesting.
Anyway, I want to pass the mic to Patos. That is his hand on.
Thanks. I want to address the issue of why to deploy DNSSEC. What is the business outcome of deploying DNSSEC? So we are now using DNS only to conduct our internet business, to connect to the internet, to connect to a website, to buy something from the internet. You will know better than me that new technologies are coming into our life, for example, RFIDs. And these RFIDs will be embedded in every product. For example, they will be used extensively into the posting system. So, at this point of time, they are using DNS, they are considering using DNS in order to be able to track back the RFIDs and get information about them. Imagine attacks to these DNS systems. Imagine attacks that can forward your parcel to another place in the world. Imagine attacks that can change the values and the qualities of a product. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is that DNSSEC is an enabling technology, as has been said by many of us here. So it brings a chain of trust into the end user. The end user can be considered a business. So a business can find a trust anchor to upload there a lot of information. Anne-Marie said the DKIM. That's one example. You can extend that to a lot of other things, and I think we will never stop, Jim, to talk about DNSSEC, because we will have all this information, all this new information that will be put onto DNS because of the security trust, the security chain that we will build with DNSSEC.
I'm now going to pass the mic to Oliver, who had his hand on a long time, and I kept ignoring him, even though we had a very fine Italian dinner yesterday.
I guess this is Ola's revenge from getting him drunk last night on good Italian wine. Benefits of DNSSEC. Let's think about this. DNSSEC has the potential of changing totally how we do certain types of validations or authentications. Today, we are in the hostages of the certificates when we want to do secure transactions. How, with certificates, does one site tell its users that to perform this other action, you should go to this other provider and do it there? For example, if you want to outsource your instant messaging service to, say, Google or Microsoft or somebody like that, how do you do it? You can create a very complicated, convoluted chain of certificates and none of the clients follows it. Or you could possibly just publish a record in DNS that is signed by the site that is referring, and the clients will trust that and go there. One project I was once brainstorming about was for the Icelandic government of how to certify tax returns being submitted by citizens. Right now in the US where I live, if I want to do electronic tax filing, they send me a postcard with a PIN code that I apply. Well, they trust the postal service to deliver it to me, but my mailbox is out on the street, so between the time the postal office delivers it and until my son takes the mail into the house, somebody can come, write down the number, leave the card. I don't see that anything has been done. If the IRS had some information to look me up and send me an encrypted email saying what is my PIN code, that would be good for them. So the idea was, if citizens can walk into some trusted third-party post office, bank, whatever, and register a token they have, which has a private key on it, then they can sign all their transactions with it. It binds it to them. It's probably them because they provided documentations. So we can enable every end of it, both the leaves and the site. We can, with DNSSEC, we can authorize transactions to be performed on our part by a third party. There are infinite possibilities. I'm not an expert on applications. People will invent fundamental things. But the thing is, once people start seeing the potential of the DNSSEC, I think they will behave a lot like the seatbelts. In 1960, how many cars came with a seatbelt? About 1%. By 1968, how many cars do you think were sold that did not have seatbelts? Probably about 1%. And most of them were probably sports cars.
I don't know the history there, but wasn't there regulation or insurance policies that pressed for that?
The government started mandating it, but people were resisting. But then suddenly people realized, I don't get hurt as much if I wear seatbelts if there's an accident. When I was growing up in Iceland, I remember there was this one poster that changed seatbelt usage. They had this poster of a very attractive young woman who was naked. She was holding her hands here, and there were bruises like this across her. And it said, I survived an accident at 100 kilometers per hour. That probably increased seatbelt usage by more, from 20% to 80% in about 1 week. Okay,
So we need
don't
marketing
know what the
campaign.
tipping point is going to be, but it may happen very quickly.
What would the naked woman look like when she had used me in a sec? Sorry. I'm completely off guard now.
I wanted to just take a moment and talk about secure email and DNSSEC. We've sort of dropped that concept around a few times, and wanted to talk about what that really means, what the relationship really is. Secure email is a much bigger thing than DNSSEC in and of itself. I think that DNSSEC, insofar as its enabling technology, is something that can facilitate some of the things that we'd look for from secure email. But the first question you have to ask yourself is, what do you mean by secure email? It typically means two things, right? Origin authentication and confidentiality. So you're looking for a way to encrypt your messages, to prevent anyone else from seeing them, and you're looking for a way to ensure you know who it came from. So DNSSEC as a technology really only provides authentication services and integrity services. It provides that for DNS for itself. So it doesn't provide confidentiality services. It may or may not provide a way to facilitate providing confidentiality in secure email, but that is something which remains to be seen and something which has to be thought about. It also does not directly provide your authentication service unless you have users who have their own domain name and you somehow tie that to the email address that they're using. You know, there's no real direct mechanism for getting authentication out of that. The other thing is we've talked about DKIM. It's been mentioned a couple of times, and it's important to keep in mind that DKIM is a service. It provides something, but it too is just something which contributes to making email a better technology. It does not in and of itself solve any particular problem. It needs additional technologies wrapped around it in order to improve email. DNSSEC can also contribute to that. I think my message in all of that is just that DNSSEC, as we've been saying here, and you asked the question about innovation, is really an enabling technology. A lot of things are possible, but we shouldn't think that these things are just going to come around automatically. There's still some work to be done. There are still some details to be identified and resolved, talked about, new ideas for how to do things. So that's my comment about secure email.
In the meantime, I saw this phone here, Alcatel-Lucent phone. My bet is that this is an IP phone. This works over IP, which triggered me to think about the telephone system. The reasons that you can make incredibly cheap calls, like 3 cents a minute from Europe to the US, is because those are routed over IP backbones. And the call routing is actually done using DNS, not on the public internet, but on private networks. So this, the reason why phone calls become absolutely cheap is internet technology, and DNS plays a large role in that, and nobody actually knows. Maybe the people in this room know, but almost nobody knows that you use IP in those cases, DNS in those cases. And again, rerouting calls is something that is very simple, and the picture that I showed yesterday where email was rerouted, I have a similar picture of a call being rerouted with the system. So just that was something I thought of. Yeah, you had your hand up. And now I lost the second microphone, but I'll get it.
So I have many questions, but I will just ask 3. The first one is the role of policies. So we said before that once people will understand that if you see, you know, the green key on the browser, it means that you are on a secure website. Criminals could start, using DNSSEC domains just to induce a false sense of security. And I think this is a part where not the technology but policies could play or will play an important role. I mean, do you think that policies, in particular based on the experience of the registries that we have here, could make the difference? I remember, I mean, it's the same with digital certificates, with the email certificates. I mean, there are some digital certificate providers, just you simply ask for a certificate and they certify the email address. There are other more secure certificates where there's a process behind. In order to get it, you need a notary service, and you need to prove your identity. And it's the same digital certificate, but the policy and the procedure to generate, attribute it, and validate it make it a lot more secure. My second question is about IP addresses. You just were mentioning that DNS is used, for example, for routing telephone calls. Do you think that IP addresses and the resolution of IP addresses could be improved through DNSSEC? It's just a curiosity. I've never heard about that, but the third thing is, I understand that there could be a lot of developments around DNSSEC, apart from securing the name resolution. Now, what do you think the GCSEC should be doing or could be doing in the future, to promote these activities. In particular, I understand that there are a lot of interesting developments, in particular for registrars, telecoms, and also postal services. And I think that's a discussion that should be brought on involving them to make them more aware of if you implement the DNSSEC, you're not only going to secure the name resolution, but you're also creating a secure platform to deliver in the future new services. Thank you.
On the last question, this is a different mic with a different amplification factor. On the last question, I'm going to do a counter question to the audience. That is, there are a number of people that came here that go back to the policy-making bodies that will report on this meeting from a GCSEC perspective. They will report to their bosses and say, this was a useful meeting, or this was an incredibly unuseful meeting, or I think we have a role here, or something. Now, so that is something that I want to do in a bit. After doing the skeptics, ask the audience, what are you going to report back? And specifically the policy people that came here from a policy background, from the postal services or any other group, what are you going to report back as what you learned here and what you think the role of GCSEC is in this case? It's a bit of a confrontational question, I believe, but there might be something that you can use for that. Policies. First, IP, your second question. How does DNSSEC help you to secure IP? I find it an incredible difficult question.
I was thinking about reverse resolution.
Yeah, so DNSSEC is already available, at least in some parts of the tree, for reverse delegations. ARPA is signed, and edited ARPA is signed, and reverse zones in the right region, so in the European region, have been signed since 2005 or 2004 or something, very early, as an enabling technology. I haven't seen much used there. I could imagine that technologies are based on that, but I haven't seen much used there. So hard to answer that question. If it comes to the routing system, I believe that DNSSEC is completely orthogonal on that. And if you would use DNSSEC, for instance, to bootstrap routing, you might have circular dependencies, and that doesn't really help. So on that part, I'm going to be sort of vague on the answer. I personally, I don't know, and I did give it a little bit of thought over the years. Yeah.
Policy, the first one.
Yeah.
The role of policies.
Did you want to speak on the second question?
Yeah, to the IP thing. Is this on?
Yeah, it is on, but you have to shout a little bit louder.
Okay. I can try to keep the microphone.
I think it's on.
That's better. I got a green light that time. There you go. Okay. I think you bring up an interesting question about, does DNSSEC improve IP addresses? And let me respond to that in the following way and ask the question, does DNSSEC improve anything in the DNS? And I think the real question that you're asking is, what is it that got that information in the DNS in the first place? What process put it there? And how do I know what that process is? And if I've signed it and I validated that signature,